Welcome everybody to another episode of Fantasy News. I'm your disheveled goblin host Daniel Green, coming from the void, the hardest working goblin in the horde, and today we have, just the widest variety of fantasy news to get into, update you on, finally cover, and fresh takes. But first, a sip of coffee. But this first story is going to be coming to us from one of the greatest fantasy authors to ever touch a page, and that is going to be the Malazan creator, Steven Erikson, who has taken to Facebook to announce that no, we are not only just getting possibly another major Malazan entry in 2025, but also Time's Cursed Cartwheel, a tale of Bauschlein and Corbal Broach, as told by Avas Didion Flicker. Sorry if I screwed up those names, I have not finished my coffee yet. And Erikson specifically said, this one might annoy some people, and not to disagree with the man himself, but he's been one of the most consistent outputters the fantasy genre, at least for epic fantasy, has ever seen. So I don't think many people have good grounds to stand on to be annoyed with him continuing to put out anything. But on top of that, this is a story, if you're not entirely aware, that takes place within the Malazan universe that's considered a bit lighter or easier for him to do because it's not one of the core earth-shifting books. In fact, these characters have even appeared in a main Malazan book, one of my favorites, Memories of Ice. But specifically when it comes to what these alternative Malazan books are, Erikson said, where the Malazan series runs counter to fantasy tropes, the necromancer novellas strive to counter the ethics of modern presumed sensibilities, which is just a fancy way of saying that they are satire. And he's called them a homage to Feats Liber and Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, which I kind of love that these exist, and I really want to get to them. I personally have not read or was even aware that these kind of satirical Malazan entries were available, which is surprising to me with how much Malazan reading I've done, and it seems like it would be a wonderful thing not to see another author taking the piss out of the core Malazan philosophy, but the creator who understands it the best adding a satirical edge to it. That sounds absolutely fabulous, and Malazan fans, why didn't you make me a goddamn guys? But if you are an Adrian Tchaikovsky fan, I'm very excited to say that the critically just heralded modern sci-fi author has had a new book listed online, not even fancily announced, just put on the interwebs, called The Hungry Gods. Emery was a rabbit, one of the tribe of survivors, scratching out an existence in the blasted landscapes of a shattered, poisoned world. The seagull fight, the pigeon trade, and the cockroach scavenge, but the rabbit had one rule. If you want to see tomorrow, you run. Rest of the synopsis on the screen, but Adrian Tchaikovsky stands out among modern sci-fi authors too, even in a time where science fiction has gotten the weirdest and most outlandish it's ever been, just because of the natural progression of creativity. He manages to not feel like he's trying too hard, but bring in concepts that are just fabulously well realized. So for Tchaikovsky fans, this kind of animalistic survivalist horror sci-fi, that sounds pretty damn good. Next news. But for this next story, I just wanted to say the words, yes, that is true, because we had an article posted titled, Brandon Sanderson's next Stormlight book is coming. New fans should start elsewhere. And this actually wasn't a terrible article, and I do think if you're considering getting into Sanderson, you should check it out. I just found it funny that the title is the most obvious thing of all time. That's like hearing the next Marvel movie's about to be released. You should probably start where the series starts though. Correct, yes, that is indeed a fact.
I'm just gonna say, because I know someone's gonna comment, I'm aware the full context of the article is saying don't start with Stormlight Archive, which is something I agree with. This is purely me saying the title of the article. Bit funny.
But if you're interested in seeing what the Cosmere is, you don't exactly like the video explanations that are all over YouTube and you'd prefer to read it because you're a reader, this actually was a pretty well done article and I'll have it linked down below, just like everything else we talk about here today. And in addition to that, if you'd like to submit a news story for us to cover here on the channel, all you gotta do is join our little Discord server, post it in the fantasy news section, and while you're there, partake in one of the most active, lively just discussions around dozens, if not hundreds of different fantasy series that are happening in that Discord all the time. If you're not aware where the goblins are incredibly active on Discord, and I'm really proud that while this channel was kind of started because I didn't have a lot of people to talk about fantasy with, now we have this thriving Discord where people can go in and make friends talking about all of their different favorite series, whether spoiler free or spoiler filled. So that's available for you all. I don't control it. The mods are amazing. Check it out if you'd like to have that in your life.
Well, it's a nice place you got here.
But for this next story, we're going to be jumping into some adaptation news because we've had the exciting announcement that Lilly Wachowski's Anarchists Unite is developing Hell Followed With Us into an animated movie. The queer debut novel by Andrew Joseph White was received to remarkable acclaim upon its release. I'm sad to say I haven't read it here, but it's getting a treatment that I think most authors would kill for, where Lilly Wachowski as well as Mary Floors will be producing it into an animated picture. Hell Followed With Us tells the story of a transgender teen, Benji, who flees the fundamentalist cult that unleashed Armageddon, but not before the cult infected him with a bioweapon that will transform him into a rotting beast and wipe out what is left of humanity. Benji teams up with a found family of teenagers holed up in an LGBTQ+ youth center for survival. And it's just wild to me that in my lifetime, I've gone from just, experiencing people on the school bus growing up telling me my mom was going to hell because she's gay, and then the bus driver being like, yes, to this full amount of representation happening for a major animated adaptation. So cool. And on top of that, there's apparently also neurodivergent representation beyond just LGBTQ+, and I think this is just fabulous. And now this is on my TBR. I can't wait to get to it. Now we are finally going to get to the Neil Gaiman news. Now, I want to apologize for not covering this sooner. It broke right when I was being threatened with a lawsuit, and I did not want to risk anything else coming on top of that, in addition to the fact that this is incredibly serious stuff, and I'm just an internet doofus who has no actual investigative abilities beyond just reading articles and trying to represent them to you here. That being said though, I can cover the news confidently that due to Neil Gaiman's alleged actions, now we are seeing many of his projects that are involved in development go on hold or stop altogether. For example, the production of Season 3 of Good Omens is apparently on hold as of now, and we have seen the Cemetery Boys be cancelled, though it is unclear if that was due to the underwhelming numbers of Season 1 or directly a result of Neil Gaiman's actions. Gaiman has offered apparently to step back from the production so that the Pratchett-Gaiman collaboration could continue forward and everyone doesn't have to lose their jobs because of Neil Gaiman's actions.
Allegedly.
This is inarguably a tricky situation because, yes, you don't want to continue to elevate and support an author who has done the things Neil Gaiman is alleged to have done. At the same time, though, there are a whole lot of people whose careers and jobs are being made by these adaptations. And so, personally, seeing him step back and having a book that he only co-wrote continue to be produced, I'm not entirely against that on face value, though it is elevating him, and it's unfortunate. I just feel so awful for the people working on the production. That sucks. I'll do my best to keep you updated on the status of these adaptations, but for now, let's move on to the next story. Now, I'm happy to say it seems we have got something generally right from the last episode of Fantasy News that I said at the time was based off of some speculative numbers, but finally, Amazon Prime has released that the Rings of Power Season 2 got 40 million views in its first 11 days, which if you do the math, is not as good as Season 1 like we predicted, and you typically want to see your Season 2 get higher numbers than your Season 1. That being said though, 40 million views is a lot and is by no means a total failure for the show, and hopefully Season 2 can course correct to bring in more people in for Season 3. It is kind of interesting to me though that I got someone like tweeting me on Twitter because the framing from Amazon is like 40 million total success, which like, yeah, that's impressive. It's not what you really want though. And then people are like, well, why wasn't your coverage more positive? Because this is, I'm not going to take like Amazon's framing of something at face value. Please do not buy streamer propaganda just because their tone is like, great. They're not going to come out and be like, oh yeah, this is kind of bad. In fact, they don't even tell you how they calculate these numbers. This could be just, hey, an impression is of you or people who are watching full episodes. They genuinely don't let us know what the metric is. And that's why I'm kind of just taking all of these things from Amazon's viewership with a gargantuan grain of salt. I really wish we would get totally transparent numbers from all streamers. But like in the publishing industry, I think they're learning that it's better for them to make sure they control the framing around that kind of stuff because it impacts marketing, and that makes it more frustrating for fans who do like the more analytical side of the shows they watch. The reason I'm not celebrating this, even though 40 million is a lot, is season 1 reportedly got 25 million in this same metric with just 1 episode in the first day of season 1, as opposed to 11 days with multiple episodes reaching 40. You can kind of see how that's not the best comparison. And with Fallout reaching 65 million within the first 16 days, it seems like they're kind of trying to specifically poke at something where they can say like, this is still really good, so you can't directly compare it to Fallout or season 1 though, because we've chosen this date. You see how I'm like, about all of this? Just know a streamer is going to frame all of its stuff to keep you as hyped for the shows that you are watching on their platform. I think that's fairly obvious. We can all understand that. But this is going to take us to just some undeniably interesting news for the Dune franchise, because Denis Villeneuve has said that Dune 3 is not like a trilogy and will be his last Dune movie for sure, though he's open to other directors continuing this specific adaptation, which I think makes complete sense and is also fascinating. I can't get into Dune 3 not being like a traditional trilogy without getting into humongous spoilers. Yeah, okay, can't talk about any of that if you haven't seen Dune 2. But in terms of him not closing the door, so to speak, on the franchise and this adaptation for other directors, it makes complete sense. I mean, him doing the same to Ridley Scott's Blade Runner was a massive elevator to his career. Not that he wasn't already successful before, but it kind of proved that he could handle a science fiction epic. And him doing kind of the same for this, for a next future director, just makes me like him all the more. It seems badass, open-minded, and reducing the amount of ego on the table, unlike so many other directors who try to just own everything they've ever touched. No one can have it but me. But speaking of finished scripts, apparently Constantine 2 is also finished being written and is very R-rated. Keanu Reeves will return, and Francis Lawrence will be directing. And for this next story, I feel bad because I covered this here. I know I got some people excited for it, and it's why I sometimes hesitate to cover the news of adaptations being greenlit, because greenlit does not mean actually getting done. The Magic the Gathering adaptation over at Netflix is officially dead. I would be surprised if we don't see another attempt at bringing Magic the Gathering to some form of adaptation in the future, but this one, the first real major attempt at it I've seen adapting it with a major streamer, is now officially off the table for Netflix.
Really? It sucks.
But before we get into the rest of the news, I would just like to give you a quick update for me. My book, Better Dead, has officially hit 70,000 words, which I could not be more thrilled by. It's feeling about at the halfway point, and I have made a creative decision for it. I'm hoping works out really well for people. And I talked about it with Evan on our podcast over on our second channel, Shoveled Goblin. Here's a clip. And then the creative decision that I think I might have to undo, but screw it. One of the characters speaks a foreign language to this person, but I want the reader to be able to experience both languages. I want them to be able to say, I can recognize this, and I know what is being said in default. And I've decided that the foreign language being spoken is our language. They're saying what we're saying because their culture is based off of us. But the language you're seeing written as English is different. So the way that you can get both is I'm spelling out English phonetically. So you can phonetically look at it and go, they're saying this in English, but you're hearing it as the character that we're following would hear it, which is the phonetics of English. And then whatever they're saying in response is auto-translated for you to read, because we all assume that's what's happening in every fantasy book, right? No one thinks that Aragorn's actually going, hello. I love it. I think it's pretty cool and lets the reader be ahead of Mikhail, the protagonist, in some cool ways. But I don't know if a publisher is going to be down for it. I think there's like a 60 to 70% chance they're like, that's cute. Stop. So that's my current writing update.
My gosh, I've never heard of that before. Like writing out a language phonetically, or our language phonetically, I should say, to draw that distinction. I think even if the publisher was like, this is a pain in the ass, you know what I mean? I still think that's a really cool idea. Personally.
Thank you.
Yeah, like it's like you're like making up a different language that the reader can understand.
That's what I'm trying to do.
That's really cool, man. That's a good idea. I like it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that like you said, I think that your worry about the publisher is valid. There's a good chance that they'll recognize what you're doing, but then be like, all right, so practically we don't want to do this. Theoretically, it's a really awesome idea.
Even if I'm told no. I'm hoping it's something that I can look back on as a writer and go, well, the idea was there, and it can lend to, okay, I got told no, let's try and capture it in this way. We can kind of meet a middle ground on and get it in the final book, because there's enough of the book structured around it that if they just give me a flat no, it's going to be hard. So if you'd like more book updates, just be sure to keep following me here. I'll slip them into fantasy news. And if you would like more publishing experience stories and tellings from Evan and I, just go ahead and follow the podcast wherever you would like to get your podcasts, or over on the channel Shoveled Goblin if you want to watch our faces. Now, there's been some Berserk controversy and drama.
Again.
And I hate to see it. As you know, if you've been following fantasy news, there have been some really high quality fan adaptations of Berserk getting done. And now we've finally had the people handling the Berserk rights officially respond with a tweet coming from the Berserk project titled, "To our readers, the production of Berserk animation is being announced on the following X account, Studio Eclipse, but such production has not been authorized by Mori Kintaro or Studio Gaga, the copyright holder. In addition, the videos accompanying the announcement are being displayed without permission." And I know what you're thinking. This is a fan thing. That's fine. And I agree with you, and so do all of the comments on Twitter. But the laws are a little bit different in Japan, so there's a cultural difference being had here, and their claim that these people are profiting off of it is technically true because of a Patreon that you can support to back up Studio Eclipse. Like, I don't want to take the low-hanging fan angle of like, well, you haven't gotten an adaptation done, so this is like, no, that's not a good legal argument. If they don't want an adaptation done, they're allowed to not have an adaptation done.
The more I look into this, the more they really are within every right to come in, because yes, Studio Eclipse is making a lot of money, it looks like, through their Patreon based off of the franchise they don't have rights to. And as much as I would like to see their project get done, whether you thought it would be or not, because you trust or don't trust Studio Eclipse, it sucks for people who did support them, without a doubt, and this is also like a stinging reminder to Berserk fans that there's no official animation coming, and it looks like no official one coming down the road to be announced. It's just a crappy situation, to be honest, and I don't know like who to trust or who is the good guy, because I typically don't back big studio stepping on fan thing, but the Patreon angle is legit. Like, that is something to criticize, so I don't know. I'm no legal expert. It looks like the fallout from this has already begun to happen, as Studio Taka has officially shut down their fan project. I've seen accusations on Reddit that these people were never planning on finishing and that they were just waiting to get slapped legally so they could take money and run away. I've not seen one of these projects make enough money to really justify a theory like that. If something like that does occur, I tend to fall into the train of thought of just people bit off more than they could chew. But in terms of the immediate fallout from what the actual Studio Gaga letter is making happen, it does seem that it's having the intended effect. How you personally end up feeling about this, whether or not it lines up with the legality of what these people are doing, it does seem to suck to see fans disappointed. I think that's something we can at least all agree on.
But before we get into the rest of the news, a quick word from today's sponsor.
Hello from the void.
You didn't think moving to New York was going to stop me from talking about Oʊʻkeɪ, did you? You fool! If you're not aware of who Oʊʻkeɪ is, you should be, because they are a sponsor here on the channel that has been around for quite some time, and I have enjoyed deeply. They provided us with some of my personal favorite accessories to wear. Like this new watch I'm sporting, the Essential in marble gold. Mine fit me perfectly, but if you need to adjust anything at all, they provide free adjustment kits. And if you need some sunnies, Oʊʻkeɪ's got them too. As you can tell, I'm a huge fan of the Achiever sunglasses. I got them in both lead wood and Kodak. I even got Kayla this new saliva-soaked ring to celebrate our new move-in for our house in New York. The champagne in nigger and gold.
Campania, there's no chip.
I'm doing it the way I do it.
Okay.
They have over 1,000 products on their online store. Well worth perusing. I love the fact that Oʊʻkeɪ offers free express worldwide shipping from Vienna, and customs fees are on them. So be sure to check them out. See if you find something you love, and if you do,
Use my code DanielG for a 10% discount.
thank you, Oʊʻkeɪ, and we love you. Bye! Ow.
And in the exact opposite angle for Berserk, where there's no adaptations happening, the Gollum movie that was announced to be happening has also been updated to be split into 2 movies. That's right, The Hunt for Gollum is now going to be 2 films, 2/3 of the original adaptation of the actual Lord of the Rings books. And I would just like to say, this video I made is goddamn prophetic. I am so done. I'm gonna be real with you, this continued evolution of just squirting out stuff from Tolkien's rights has made me kind of less interested in watching Rings of Power or supporting what's being done, because without question, they are trying to MCUify Tolkien's work. And with all these people upset about like Rings of Power having black elves or whatever, which is so stupid, that's just, no, you should not be upset about that. What you should be upset about is Tolkien, the guy whose son has said Tolkien probably wouldn't like any movies, and the guy who doesn't like things like tractors would be furious to see this being done in my, I would say, more educated opinion than these people who are like, Tolkien hated the first. No, he didn't. Like this is actually antithetical to the spirit of Middle-earth and what Tolkien was trying to do with his allegorical anti-industrial stuff. Like, good God. I just want to say,
I suggest you leave the boy alone, or I shall be forced to deliver it to the appropriate authorities.
the franchise is precious, right? And we should protect the preciouses from the evil, nasty, wicked Hollywood executives, because it's ours.
Daniel, we're going to need to put a pin in whatever you're about to say next, because people are talking about Bloodborne, and you don't want to talk when the people are talking about Bloodborne. This week, we got a misleading article titled, Bloodborne is finally getting a remaster, but only on PS5 Pro. I know how much hype surrounds getting a Bloodborne port that runs at 60 FPS, so I'm going to nip this in the bud. At this time, there is no confirmed remaster or port for Bloodborne running at 60 FPS on the PS5 Pro. Sony has announced, however, that the PS5 Pro will give certain backwards compatible PS4 games an added boost in resolution and frame rate. People are hoping that this means that Bloodborne will be included, but this is not confirmed. Personally, I do think that there's at least a decent chance that they do end up boosting Bloodborne to 60 FPS. PlayStation has mastered launching consoles without solid launch titles. How do you make it so people upgrade to a new system? You make it so that the system is the only way you can play a beloved game at its very best. So don't get your hopes up, nothing is confirmed right now for Bloodborne running at 60 FPS on the PS5 Pro. For all we know, they'll save it so that they have a launch title for the PlayStation 6 whenever that inevitably comes in the years ahead. Pierce Brown has posted to Instagram that the Red Rising saga has sold a whopping 6 million copies. Good job, Pierce. I'm proud of you. If you sell 2 million more, then there will be as many copies in existence as there are people on the planet, so your work isn't done yet, Pierce. Keep going. The release of Red God means
World domination.
But with the objective best holiday Halloween just around the corner, we have gotten a litany of upcoming trailers for horror projects I think are worth checking out. And I'm gonna go ahead and just get them out of the way with some quickie news here. Starting with I Will Never Leave You Alone, which, to be perfectly frank, is one of my biggest fears. I've dealt with a stalker before, and this seemed like a supernatural demon haunting thing, and if you like that, check it on out. But for the next trailer, we also got a look at Your Monster, which seemed to be like horror cute, which is a very specific tone to pull off. I'm just saying, like the creature design going on here, I want to give him a hug, but in a way where I'm also like, that's creepy. It seems kind of like a reverse Beauty and the Beast or some kind of twist on that. If it's based off something, I'm not aware of that, and I'm sorry, but I really like this trailer, the humor, though I'm afraid this looks a little predictable. We'll have to see. And then finally, easily the one I'm most excited for, we had the trailer drop for HBO's adaptation of Salem's Lot, and it is pitch perfect from a trailer, which is a lie, but for what I want to see for a Salem's Lot adaptation. And I like the original adaptation. It feels like the right time to do another, and oh my God, how many Stephen King's adaptation are there? And what percentage of them are actually good? There's bad ones, there's a lot of bad ones, but there's like also several, many I would put in the top 100 films of all time. Green Mile, Shining, frickin' Shawshank Redemption, Carrie, and I'm such a fan of being a Stephen King fan. It's a rewarding experience. And then just speaking of Kayla, I'm really proud to announce that a video game she worked on back when she was living in Korea has finally had a full-length trailer announced, and you can see her mocap work in this trailer, Crimson Desert, which is a game that has been in development for a long time, based off what Kayla has told me, is now going to be hitting PCs and consoles, and it's really neat for me to like look at a character walking in this trailer and be like, that's Kayla, that's her swinging that axe. And her friends that I met that were really nice people. So I can say this, weird angle. I don't know anything about Crimson Desert, the game, but I can tell you the team that did the mocap work, I met some of them, lovely individuals. And in news that's not really news, Christopher Rocchio, on the interview him and I had, was asked in the comments section if he would ever do an ancient Rome / Greece / Mongolian set fantasy series, to which he replied, never say never. And of course, I'm not saying that this is like confirmation that this is the series he's gonna be working on after he finishes Suneater later this year. But it would be really cool, you know, if something like that were to be made by him. But really, this is not fantasy news, and probably like I shouldn't even be putting this comment in front of a lot of people to set an expectation. There's no way this is actually what's going to be happening. And then for the final story today, we're going to be getting into before the Indie Pub promo. Yes, Audible is offering narrators the ability to have AI narrate books for them using their voices. And I hate that I'm gonna do this. I'm going to bend over backwards, take a break from my usual anti-AI tirade to say, I can understand to an extent that this does increase accessibility for audiobooks by getting them adapted faster, right? And a narrator can even come back through and go, yes, for the majority of these scenes where I'm keeping my narrating voice just simple, I'll let the AI run it, but for these battle sequences or high emotion sequences, I'll go and naturally narrate it, and that way you can get an audiobook done in a few days. That's amazing, and the visually impaired have more access to books. I love that. But my concern comes in with just obviously the proliferation of AI, and also that is assuming a lot. That is assuming that when you sign this away, AI is not going to get to the point where it can just do all that for you, and then the artistry of your art form is dead. And one of the things I'm seeing more and more narrators talk about in response to this is they do genuinely consider what they do an artwork, and anything like this is taking that away to an extent. Don't get me wrong, painters, now that they have digital sketches, also have shortcuts that they use to be able to get their full projects done sooner. Everything here is on a spectrum. It just scares me. And I think a lot of people inside and outside the industry can understand that, because there's all these reports about how AI in the next 5 years is going to affect like 60 million jobs or whatever. And we don't know how much of that slippery slope is really slick. Be incredibly careful who you sign your voice away to and what restrictions are on it, because big corporations love to use specific wording to make you think it's limited to here when it's actually limited out of shot. But now let's close out the fantasy news with the Indie Pub promo of the day. And if you would like to see your book promoted here on the channel, all you gotta do is jump into that same Discord server and put in the Indie Pub promo section, and I'm just one at a time chipping away at it. But here's the next Indie Pub promo.
And today's Indie Pub promo is The Boy and the Hunter by Jorge Luis Rojas. Pitched as for fans of action, fantasy, suspense, drama, and a touch of horror, with beautiful cover art by Mildred Balan. In the small town of Adler, Minnesota, George McKnight is having a hard time at school. He doesn't know how to talk to his crush, his arrogance almost gets him kicked out of classes, and his stepfather is categorically the worst there could be. Meanwhile, Mr. Elijah Pickford is out in the woods of Adler, trying to solve a very peculiar mystery with the help of some very peculiar friends. The cold and the dark are sadly the least of Elijah's problems. Check it out in the links down below.
But this has just been your latest episode of Fantasy Schnoz. Like and subscribe if you have not already, and hit the Patreon if you'd like to support what I do here. Big thank you to Oʊʻkeɪ for sponsoring today's video. I wear their stuff like genuinely a lot. Check them out. And have a good one, y'all. Peace.